listening to the Exploring Fitness Podcast, Episode 11. In this episode, we discuss some of the technologies revolutionizing human performance and physical therapy. In 3, 2, 1, go. I'm Dan Dalator. In over 10 years of experience as a clinician and a coach, I've worked with hundreds of athletes to help them improve their health, wellness, and fitness, but still feel that there is so much more for all of us to learn. This is a podcast dedicated to furthering our understanding of health, wellness, fitness, and how to apply these concepts into our daily lives to create true and lasting changes in your fitness and health. This is the Exploring Fitness Podcast. Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. We took a little break during the busy summer here in Maine, but we're back now with a brand new episode for you. If you remember back to episode 1, we discussed how fitness should be measurable, observable, and repeatable. The same holds true for health and wellness metrics or during a patient's journey through physical therapy. It is important to collect meaningful data that can be tracked reliably for many reasons, including being able to show a patient their progress through objective data. This progress can be small and incremental, and sensitive measurement can display these improvements. Making informed decisions about somebody's plan of care. If something isn't measured, or if it isn't measured accurately, it likely won't be properly addressed. And the ability to measure the unseeable. There are many things that today's technologies can pick up that we can't see with the naked eye, giving us more insight to better manage an athlete's treatment or load management. There is a company based right here in the greater Portland area that creates these technologies. Hawkin Dynamics in Westbrook makes world-class force plates and dynamometers, allowing clinicians and fitness professionals the ability to precisely measure numerous metrics to assist in health and fitness decision-making. I sat down with one of their employees to find out more about their products and how they can be incorporated into the clinic and the gym. All right, so my next guest is a doctor of physical therapy and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. When he isn't in the clinic treating patients, he does some work for Hawkin Dynamics, which is a company utilizing force measurement across various industries using tools like force plates and dynamometers. Their tools are currently being used by universities and professional sports teams around the globe, and he is leading the expansion into the clinical application space for those tools. Josh Segal, welcome to the Exploring Fitness Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Excited to talk about everything.
Did I say that right? Segal?
Yep.
Segal?
I respond to anything. So
either way?
Yeah, either way works. I've heard it all.
Awesome. So the first question I ask all of my guests, a little unprompted, but what is fitness to you?
Love that question. I think fitness to me is exploring your body's willingness, desire to move. I think there's no one encapsulating definition. I think it's a very subjective, individualized response. And I think it's just anyone's willingness to be active.
Cool. Exploring your body's desire to move.
Yeah.
I like that. What does that mean for you personally, I guess?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit different now as I'm coming back from ACL reconstruction.
Well, I guess you can give us a before and since then.
Yeah, no. I think my fitness journey's been fairly different, and it honestly changes season to season. Sometimes in the winter, it's in the gym more. It's rock climbing, skiing if I wasn't injured. Maybe not not skiing again. But I think being in Maine, it's exploring the outdoors, it's hiking. I grew up as a tennis player. I've exploring the pickleball realm. Just any form of movement I really enjoy.
Nice.
So,
Did you tear it skiing?
I did.
So not planning on going back to that, or not quite yet?
Probably not. Don't really want to do it again. It hasn't been that fun. Can't recommend it.
All right. So did I miss anything in the intro? Anything else you want to add about your professional stuff, or?
No, I think you nailed it.
Cool. So can you kind of like just start off by telling us how you kind of came into the space of performance measurement with your background as a doctor of physical therapy?
Yeah, so I joined the team at Dirigo Physical Therapy in 2021, and they had a set of Hawkin force plates, and that was really my first exposure. I had kind of seen them on Instagram from various companies, but wasn't super familiar with them. And then through my boss at Dirigo, he had been using the force plates for quite some time. I believe he used them with his time at the Brooklyn Nets. So he kind of gave us a run through demonstration. And then I opened up Pandora's box on their website of what more can I learn? What goes into this? Because I found it very interesting that it wasn't just simply do a test on the force plates and see, because it spits out a ton of information. There's a lot to learn. And so that's where my interest kind of sparked of how much can I learn? What can I actually do with these?
Cool. So how did you get teamed up with Hawkin?
Yeah. My office is directly across the hall from their headquarters here in Westbrook, Maine. And so I started meeting most of them because they'd walk in and say, hey, my back hurts. Do you want to take a look at me? Oh, my shoulder hurts. Do you want to take a look at me? And then the VP of branded performance, his name's Drake Burberry. He works out in the clinic quite a bit. So he plays pickleball and he's pretty active. So we just kind of sparked up conversation, and I got pretty familiar with him first.
Cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about Hawkin Dynamics and kind of like their mission in the world of sports performance and rehab?
Yeah. So the owner and his brother, Oliver, they've been in like motion analysis for quite some time. And then back, I want to say 2017, 2018, they started Hawkin Dynamics with the goal of making a portable force tracking assessment. And then it's just kind of gone up from there with a lot of the sports performance world, realizing that, hey, we should be tracking a lot of this stuff. We should be taking a look more at how our athletes move and why they move that way. So this was just another umbrella of fitness technology.
Awesome. For those of our listeners who might not be familiar, can you talk a little bit about like what exactly are force plates versus dynamometers, and how exactly they work in measuring some of those performance things that you're talking about?
Yeah, so force plates are truly two plates, typically right next to each other, and you can stand on them and it will just simply tell you how much you weigh. You can squat on them and it will tell you your symmetry, how much weight bearing you have on your left side versus your right side. And traditionally in like the sports performance world, they're used for athletes to jump on it, and it will show you how much force they put through their legs as they're going down into a jump and then up, exploding from the jump, and then how much they have, kind of how much force they put on each side as they're landing. So it allows you to break up the jump into about 4 segments, and you can explore each segment to find deficits, asymmetries, areas of improvement. You can also use it to track your athlete and say why they're a little fatigued, how much should we be training them? So that's kind of one of the big roles of the force plate. And then the dynamometer, I think traditionally for the physical therapists listening, they have the handheld dynamometer. You are holding a device, you have your patient push up into this. The new device over at Hawkin is the True Strength, and that's going to be a fixed dynamometer. So that's being attached to a squat rack, a rig, hopefully some other options soon. And that's going to allow it to take the therapist out of the testing to make it a little more objective, to make it a little more consistent, reliable, and valid. That way, our strength isn't impacting what we're testing, which is going to be force output, average force output, and then our device now offers rate of force development and total impulse, which we're really excited about.
Awesome. Can you, I guess, kind of like walk through? So you mentioned a couple different tests that you can do on the force plates. Can you just kind of like slow each one of those down a little bit? Tell us kind of like exactly what's going on and dive into some of those results and the data that you can get from that.
Yeah, totally. The tests on the force plate, there's probably like 20, 25 that you can run.
Give us like the top number one.
Totally. I think the easiest one, the one that you're going to find most often, is that counter movement jump, typically with the patient or the athlete's hands on the hips. That way you take out any arm swing and you're truly looking at lower body force and explosiveness. And so that's one that's really easy to administer. People can administer, patients could even come in and do it themselves with the tablet. You're going to be able to pick up on a lot of important variables just from that counter movement jump. Again, how much force are they putting potentially through their surgical side as they're going down into the jump, what we call the braking phase. That's one of our favorite areas to look at asymmetry, because maybe they had an ACL reconstruction or they just have patellar tendonitis. They don't want to sink super low into that before they jump, before they explode. So maybe they're kind of shifting off from that side. And then, yeah, I'd say the CMJ is probably the easiest one to do and one of our favorites over at Hawkin, and me personally in my clinical practice.
Awesome. So you said that like you can break a jump into 4 different segments. You just mentioned the braking phase.
Yep.
Can you just briefly just go through the other 3 phases?
Yeah, so there's the unweighting phase. That is the start. So technically there's a weighting phase before that, but from what we're looking at, the unweighting phase is going to be when they're standing and they are starting their descent down, so kind of that free fall. And then we have the braking phase where they're producing force against gravity. And then you have that switch into the propulsive phase. Between there is the amortization phase. So, which you can find some variables at, but it's not broken down into the system necessarily as a phase. And then you have takeoff, and then obviously your landing phase.
Awesome. And then you threw around some other big words, like some of the data things that you can get during each of those phases. Or I think you were talking about it specifically with the dynamometer, like rate of force production. I think it was
force development.
Force development. Yeah. So could you like dive into some of those terms a little bit and kind of like what they are and what they can tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of big words. It's a lot of physics, which I always enjoy physics. So it's really cool for me to kind of get back into that world. Obviously, physical therapy is a good amount of physics, but yeah, like rate of force development is pretty much how quickly are they developing that force. It is a bit of a sensitive metric. It can change person to person, also based on their weight. So it can be a little bit variable, but at least in the dynamometer world, from the other products I've seen, we've never been able to kind of quantify that with a handheld device. I can't say off the top of my head if it's part of like biodex testing for leg extension and knee flexion, but it's now something that we're able to offer. So something really cool from that return to sport aspect if you have limited kind of technology, if you don't have that biodex available. Yeah, there's really a lot of big phrases in all of this, and it can be a bit of a learning curve to digest all of it. Like what is looking at impulse again, which is force times time. So the amount of force they're able to provide over, say, 5 seconds, that's going to be their impulse. Or on our charts, it's the area under the curve or over the curve based on what part of the jump they're in.
Awesome. So this can give us a lot of good data as somebody's moving through a rehab process,
Yeah,
right?
so it's something, so you could use the dynamometer fairly early on in like upper extremity rehab. If we're looking at like sub-max isometrics as part of a rotator cuff repair protocol, what are sub-maximal isometrics? I usually tell people, hey, don't push until your arm's shaking, but how good of information is that? Where if we can say, okay, their left side is able to produce 200 newtons of external rotation strength, let's maybe work at 10% of that on their operative side, and we can actually see that on our device and on our tablet that they're hitting that threshold, not going up above that, and then the patient's able to get that appreciation. So we can start using the force plates as well very early on post-operatively just for weight bearing status. Are they partial weight bearing and they're only supposed to put like 25% of their weight? Instead of taking out the bathroom scale and having them weight shift on and off that, let's put them on the plates and see what does 25% look like. And then working all the way through kind of towards end stage rehab of doing higher intensity jumps and making sure that they have fairly symmetrical phases and metrics within those phases, and that their curve is looking a lot cleaner.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like on the opposite end of the spectrum, what kinds of things are you looking for when potentially like determining if an athlete is ready to return to prior level of sports play and things like that?
Yeah, I think especially in the rehab field, that is growing, and it's one of the harder things to just use force plates alone. But as our normative data set is growing, as more clinicians are starting to use this, I think we'll start to see a lot more research being developed. So it's a really helpful adjunct right now. And it allows you to make more intervention data decisions, but also just take a look again at all of those phases and see, what do they look like? Are they shifting away? Are they producing enough force? Are they shying away from that injured side while landing? So it really allows you to break down each phase of the jump, and this counter movement jump is highly researched and correlated with jumping, sprinting, cutting. So we can feel confident looking at this data and saying, if this data is looking really clean compared with all of the other tests that we're doing as part of our arsenal, we feel comfortable returning this athlete.
Cool. So I was in your office one point and you were kind of showing me these, and you were like, I personally did a jump, and you were showing me all of the different data points that these force plates are able to spit back at you. Like, do you know off the top of your head how many different things the plates measure, like during a single counter movement jump?
My best guess is about 50
different things.
Yeah, so it's quite a lot. And as we get more into the clinical space, we're going to be cleaning that up for physical therapists. That way it's less about them deciding. We get a lot of really good feedback from our sports performance coaches because they want all of that data, and
right.
Every different sports performance coach, strength coach likes to use it a little bit differently. I think with physical therapy, there is definitely that learning curve, and our goal is to provide solutions to make physical therapists' job a little bit easier. So we're going to be cleaning that up where it's a couple key metrics from each phase of the jump.
Cool. Can you talk about some of those key metrics, like that you're going to be, that you personally would kind of like wean down to?
Yeah. So a really good one of probably our most talked about from a rehab standpoint is left-right average braking force. So during that braking component, how much force are you putting on each side as you're moving against gravity? So we like to see it below roughly like 10%. But again, like I have baseline data for myself, so it's really helpful to know what I was at beforehand. But that's where we like to use roughly about 10%, where over 10%, we're saying, okay, we need to really work on this. We need to do some interventions that work on deceleration training, braking control, usually just getting them strong and used to loading up that side. So that's kind of one of our favorite metrics. The two big ones that most people are thinking about are jump height and MRSI, which is going to be the reactive strength index. And that's just typically a measure of elasticity, how springy someone is. So those are some of the big output metrics that we like to see. But I also like to take a look at the strategy, how they accomplish that jump. So that's looking at counter movement depth and time to take off. So we would expect as they start jumping early on within their rehab, they're potentially going to be sinking really down into that jump because they need to produce more force. That's one strategy they use. Or they're going really shallow because they're having pain and they don't want to sit down into that side super well. Or time to take off, they're just slow. That neuromuscular response is blunted. It's slow. So we expect that to get quicker as they move out of that rehab stage.
Cool. And you said that these plates can take a significant amount of force, right? So like potentially you could have somebody back squatting or doing Olympic lifts while on the plates to get a bunch of these metrics as well.
Yeah, I have people squat, deadlift on them all the time. I think they can withstand up to 1,000 pounds, a couple thousand pounds.
That's crazy.
I know that Hawkin Dynamics was just a sponsor at the International Junior Weightlifting competition in Spain this past week. So I assume they were doing some kind of Olympic lifting on it.
Awesome.
Pretty heavy.
Another thing that can be measured on these is like a isometric mid-thigh pull, right?
Yeah. So that's another really good test and really easy to collect and quick. And so, for example, I go to a local high school and I run like a little combine for them where I have them jump on the plates. I have them do a mid-thigh pull so I can see what their peak force per body weight is, because it's not great to just look at peak force. You want to compare it relative to their body weight, because we would expect some of these bigger athletes to obviously pull more weight, and then compare that to how springy they are with a counter movement jump with that modified reactive strength index. I can set up a quadrant and see kind of who's their strongest and springiest athletes all the way down to their least springy, less strong athletes. And you're easily able to develop like a strength and conditioning program for them.
Awesome. Are those two tests combined, the counter movement jump and the mid-thigh isometric pull, is that an index in and of itself? Is there like the dynamic strength index?
There is a dynamic strength index, yeah.
Is that what that is, or is that something different?
So I use like a quadrant report for it, but the DSI, so you can use the dynamic strength index. You can use that for a belt squat. You can use it for any isometric test, and it's going to compare kind of the same variables. But I would say the mid-thigh pull is more commonly used than the belt squat for right now.
Awesome. So what would you say are the most, or what sport are you guys currently the most involved with collecting measurements with your force plates?
As a company, we're really involved in basketball. So Drake, who I mentioned earlier, he's doing his PhD right now. He just published a whole article about normative data for college basketball players. He used to work with the Illinois basketball team, so he's really involved with both professional and college basketball. So pretty involved with that. And every year the plates are at the NBA Combine, but also the NFL Combine. So quite a bit of NFL teams have it, and college football teams.
Cool. So aside from like professional sports teams, I guess, like how can coaches or PTs kind of easily start integrating these technologies into their practice? I know you said something briefly about like measuring to see how fatigued an athlete might be to know whether or not they kind of need to hold back a little bit in practice or something, but can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that's the value for like, especially PT clinics who work with endurance athletes. So getting our patients who might be training for marathons, half marathons, ultra marathons, getting them used to jumping on the plates. And as they come in and they're changing their running volume, have them jump on the plates, take a look at their velocity metrics, their time-based metrics. So again, that time to take off, and see, are those dipping? Are those getting slower? Because research shows that athletes are going to be able to kind of maintain their jump height, interestingly enough, but their times are going to be a little bit slower. And so looking at that can say, hey, we might need to do a deload week. We might need to decrease running volume this week, because obviously overtraining, decreased sleep, those are risks for injury. So just kind of bucketing our patients and to whatever they need.
Cool. So like you said, there's 50 different potential measurements that this thing spits out.
Yeah.
Sounds like I guess what's the learning curve to starting to use some of these tools? Because that can seem a little overwhelming to somebody who might not necessarily have any experience with them yet.
Yeah, so that is my current project at Hawkin Dynamics, is
awesome.
Creating like a force plate user's guide for physical therapists to help with that learning curve. So kind of breaking through, kind of explaining what these jumps are, why you would use them, different patient populations you could use them in, and then the metrics to consider, and then all of the different things that you might want to look at. But I mean, I kind of break it down that force plates are just another tool that we use. So if you get subjective history and someone has pain playing recreational basketball and they notice that they're swelling following getting rebounds, put them on the plates and let's see, are they shying away from one side? And then that just leads to intervention. So it can be as kind of complex as you want it, but you can also easily break it down based on what they're telling you, which test you want to do, and then figure out the metrics from there. I do think the metric selection is one of the biggest learning curves, since there are so many, and that's what we're really trying to figure out, is how can we make that a little more easily digestible.
Cool. So that's your current project currently?
Yes.
Is there anything else that Hawkin is working on to either improve these tools or bring other things into the industry?
So we have a whole clinical interface as part of our app that we're hoping to roll out. I'm not exactly sure when, but where it has, okay, I'm looking at knee pain. These are the tests I want to run with both the dynamometer and the force plates. These are the different movements that we want to do. These are the metrics we want to track. And then, so just kind of taking simplicity and giving that into the hands of clinicians, because again, our goal is solutions. So figuring out pain points of why is strength testing a little bit slower? How can we make that quicker and still provide really good objective data? Because that's going to lead to better patient outcomes. And then how can we get more of this technology? We want to kind of transform the physical therapy world, because at least I don't know about your practice, Dan, but at least in mine, it can be a little frustrating because I'm insurance based, where it's like, okay, all of these insurance values, you have to say, what are their goals? Are they getting better? And I think that's great. I think these force plates and dynamometer allow for easy goal creation, but these companies don't understand the value in tracking these metrics just yet. And just the fact that there's a lot of complacency in physical therapy of many clinics not even measuring strength or understanding what a counter movement jump is. So, and how valuable it is. So just kind of transforming physical therapy is a goal of ours.
Yeah, I love that. Not being involved in the insurance world, I don't need the objective data for that reason per se, but I definitely still love collecting as much objective data as I can so that we can track that throughout somebody's plan of care. So, yeah.
And it's a very natural way to bring clients in, is if you can show them what you're looking at, why you're looking at it, and what you're going to do with that data, and how you're going to make sure that they're progressing along the way. I mean, I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. Most people like data, right?
Yeah. They love seeing their data.
Yeah.
Nobody really understands what I'm looking at. So I try to explain it to them, and they're all just like, oh, cool. Did it improve? I'm like, yes or no. And this is why I think no. And this is what we're going to do to get it to improve. They're like, okay, cool. I'm sold.
Cool. So I guess outside of like the PT world, for normal everyday athletes, other than the, like you were saying, load management kind of thing, like, is there any other benefit to like everyday athletes? using the force plates and getting some of this data?
I think if they're active individuals, having this data, as we know, the literature and the research really supports strength training and power training, even especially for older adults. So being able to profile that, find out where you might have some asymmetries, where you might need to work on. This allows for a very simple implementation of a training program that you're then able to go retest and make sure you're making gains. So I think for any active adult, it would be really cool for them to see what their force profile is.
Cool. Just like you said, it's another tool to get information about your health, wellness, fitness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Where can our listeners go to learn more about Hawkin Dynamics and Josh Segal? And
I will be creating an Instagram shortly to kind of go through how I look at a force time curve, do some case studies, probably talk about some interventions that I use to work on the braking phase, the propulsive phase, in the physical therapy clinic, in the physical therapy world. So I'll pass that hand along to you when I create it. But
Perfect.
Just hawkindynamics.com or Hawkin Dynamics on Instagram. A lot of really cool content there. And I mean, we have collaborators from all over the world doing vastly different things. So it gives cool exposure to all the different utilizations of these force plates and the dynamometer.
Awesome. Any final thoughts on the future of some of these measurement tools, or in sports, rehab, anything?
I really am excited to see where it goes, because I do think we're at a bit of a tipping point for the physical therapy world, especially as these young, curious physical therapists come into the space looking for more objective testing, looking beyond just like a manual muscle test. It's beyond me a little bit that that's still being taught in physical therapy curriculums. But I mean, if you go to your sports med doc even, or primary care, they're still looking at manual muscle tests as a basis for diagnosis and for kind of qualifying the need for physical therapy. So I'm hoping we can move beyond that and we can start to see these technologies a lot more in practice. That way we are measuring what we're hoping to measure, tracking what we're hoping to track, and just improving patient outcomes.
Awesome. Love it. Hey, Josh, thank you so much for coming on. A wealth of information, man.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it. This was fun.